I was going to start an amazing herb garden this fall, but then I realized something. I couldn't find the time. Yeah. Dead silence in the room.
That sound is the death of a dying
so
joke.
Bad. So listen, everybody, gardeners and homesteaders, new and old, and all of you guys. We are here to talk today about, we haven't decided yet. Should we talk about our garden wins or our garden losses for the year 2022? I think we should start on a positive note and go with our garden wins right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. I am Ben Gardner, and I garden in Zone 8A, and I am here with my lovely co-hosts,
Batavia from Be Better Garden, who always gardens in Zone 6A, despite what I may have told you previously.
Yep, we have to keep saying this periodically until Batavia gets it in her head. But as you may know, and if you don't know, we are a listener-supported podcast, so please check us out on Patreon at Backyard Gardens, and you can do two things. One, you can get 10% off if you sign up for a whole year. Two, you can get 2 extra episodes a month. 3, there was a secret one. You can also have a chance to win a one-on-one conversation with Batavia and myself to talk about whatever you would like. We also have a Teespring where you can buy t-shirts and all kinds of fun stuff like that. We are running a discount code until I'll let you know when to get you 20% off, and the code is XMAS2022. So please check that out. We have an Amazon list where we have tried all the products, and also YouTube. Check us out. Boom, there it is. Okay, so do you have a lot of garden wins for the year, Batavia?
So my kind of, measured answer is I'm not sure. But my kind of more positive, focus on those things answer is yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Realistically, I think that my garden wins, if I look at it, list could be longer than my garden fails, but my losses for the year are heavy. But we won't worry about that today. We'll worry about the wins. How's that?
Yeah, just so to put some parameters around this, we're far too realistic of people and gardeners. Listen.
You know.
Oh yeah. If I wasn't able to see you, I would assume that was just something in the background. But looking at your face and that sound coming out of it, I'm not pleased. All right, moving around, parameters around this. So of course, our ability to grow food is a win, right? But because we are realistic people and realistic gardeners, and we're continuing to strive for improvement, we have to be able to stop and say, all right, what didn't go the way we expected? So. Don't worry, we're not being Debbie Downers when we get to the episode or the part of the episode around losses. It's just something that we do and we recommend that y'all do when it comes to looking back on your garden year.
Well, it's all about being realistic, and I don't want to keep my head in the clouds and be like, everything was perfect. It's not always that way. But it is, and one of the reasons why we're starting with the wins is because it's important to stay positive. You know what I mean? The trick here is, the trick is, can you do a whole podcast talking about wins? Because I know when we start talking about losses and start analyzing them, that could be a part 1, 2, 3, and a foe. It don't matter. So we're fixing to give it to y'all just straight up. The wins this year, they go all across the board for us. I garden in all 4 seasons as much as I can. Winter is my slower season, but I still am able to get some kind of food out. I think each month, maybe January, not so much, but I'll just call it each month to make it simple. And I know Batavia, she's been pushing back, how far? Like 3 seasons now? You're a 3-season gardener?
So I'm in the garden, outside in the garden from March through like the end of December. if we have a very mild early winter, which generally in Chicago we do.
Yeah. So, and we know, or I know, what happens when Miss Batavia goes into the garden in January too. I have a video that shows.
I was just talking about that. He's when you wonder if your friends are laughing at you or with you, know that this guy's laughing at me. So I
with you.
I slip and fall. I was just talking about this like last week. I don't remember the circumstance. Oh, we were talking about air fryers, and like the sacrifice I made to get an updated air fryer was, sliding all around my backyard on the ice that clearly was under all of the snow. But anywho.
When I was in my deepest depths of COVID a month or so ago, Batavia sent me that video again, and it literally brought me back. So,
you know what?
I
Actually,
appreciate it.
Let's move that to the Lost episode, because that happened in January. It happened this year. Good grief.
Oh, so do you want to start with like seeds and work our way through starting seeds, or how do you want to do this?
I don't have a laundry list of kind of seed starting when. So I think I have enough to kind of create the full experience. I will kick us off there though.
Go.
My goal, and I always have a lot of goals around seed starting, and I don't always get to it, but I wanted to start seeds much earlier, and I started seeds like January 17th or 18th. So that was an absolute win. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, my peppers, which if you fast forward, later in the episode, you'll hear about how my peppers were also a win. So I feel good around that kind of full circle moment,
We've made it 7 minutes in, and Batavia's already flexing. I love it. But to match your flex, I can't really talk about my seed starting one because I started my seeds in 2021. My winter seeds I actually pushed out earlier than normal and started them the week of Christmas last year, and it worked out really good. I'm gonna continue to do that. My cabbages and stuff like that were really strong, and the arguments there that they were already a little too early though.
Yeah.
So there is that, but it was more convenient for me, so I was willing to take that risk. You know what I mean? Like there comes a point where you're like, okay, I had to either delay it and be a little bit more inconvenienced, because I'm really big on like the holidays being for the holidays and with family, and I didn't want to be out there digging in soil during that time. So that worked out really good for me. And that was like you, I started my other seeds earlier as well, and I was able to stick to a time schedule on that, and it worked out almost flawlessly for me. So seed starting for spring was a huge win for me.
Yeah, and of course the peppers, which would have been the first things that I started, weren't for spring. For spring, I definitely had wins with kind of getting my celery, which I've heard has been difficult to start, out the door, as well as chard, which did really well for me this year as well in the garden. So those were some of the things that I planted out for spring, that I started from seed early, which I absolutely consider a win. Especially anything that I can keep in my garden throughout all of the growing seasons for me and keep it healthy. That's really huge for me.
Yeah. When you started your peppers in January, when did you plant them out?
Yeah, that's roughly when it all falls apart. So, I didn't get them planted out until like maybe the second week of May.
Okay, so you kept them inside for a minute.
Well, I started hardening them off like right at April 30th. And so I'm thinking like around the 10th, between the 10th and the 15th of May is when I actually planted them out.
And then how big were they when you put them out?
I like to compare them to like seedlings you'd see in the good old days in the home improvement stores and the nurseries and all. They were sizable. Like most of them had 6 or 7 true leaves. Maybe 1 or 2 were probably even starting to produce flowers, which isn't ideal. That's not like a sign of success. But I was satisfied with all of them with the exception of the habanada, which is one of my favorite sweet peppers, kind of very flavorful. And it's the second year I've planted that out, and it's just super slow. It was super slow last year, super slow from seed to transplant, and super small. So, I mean, outside of that, though, everything else was really, really looking healthy. So I was pleased. Last year's pepper plants went out really, really small. That's why I wanted to start them earlier this year.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's a long time to have them inside taking care of them, but it sounds like it worked out well for you.
It was painful too, but again, focusing on the positive. I still struggle with a lot of aphids on pepper plants. So, I mean, the amount of times I was rinsing those things off, leaves and all of that stuff. I know there are other methods you can use to control that, but the longer they were inside, the more I had to manage that.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it sounds to me, you know, a lot of times, let's see, I start my pepper seeds around Valentine's Day, and then I get them out late April at the latest, usually. So it sounds to me like, if I follow suit, I could probably start mine a little bit earlier. And I think I actually did start pepper seeds a little bit earlier than my tomatoes last year, because my tomatoes ended up like just taking over my seed starting shelf at one point in the past, and it got to be a real headache, you know. But yeah, so
for just a quick note, seeds seem slower to germinate. I'm not diagnosing that this year. My peppers, I started them last year March 15th on or around. Yeah, March 15th. That sounds right. And I started them this year, like basically 2 months earlier. I'm telling you, they were like so small last year when they went out. And so technically that puts me at around 3 months of indoor growth. If you think it took, 7-10 days or something to germinate.
Yeah.
So 3 months of growth. I'm pretty pleased with that. And all in all, I probably could have started hardening them off maybe a week earlier, but I'm not going to get, kind of into that nuanced detail. I'm pretty pleased with, the indoor growing, the seed starting of it all, the keeping as many plants as I could healthy. I had an overflow. I had more pepper plants than I could actually get into the garden.
Right. I had the same issue with pepper plants this year. But moving on, my potatoes were amazing this year. It was my first year growing white potatoes, and it was super easy. Got them in the ground around Valentine's Day like I'm supposed to. They did their own thing. I didn't do a damn thing with them. And when they all died back, I harvested a bunch of potatoes, and I was pretty impressed with that. Even in compacted soil and everything, I still got what I deem a good harvest for a first year growth. You know what I mean? So moving forward, I'm debating now how much space should I give my potatoes for the next year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that. What about you? Well, I was going to ask how your potatoes went, but that may not be on your list.
Yeah, no, it's not on my list. I don't know that it's on either list. Kind of.
Oh, it's in the no man's land list?
Yeah, it's kind of hovering. I think I need to eat more of them before I can decide whether it's a win or a loss.
Yeah.
I think I'm in my mind, I'm kind of going along the calendar. That's the way my mind processes things sometimes.
Yeah.
So, a win for kind of moving outdoors was getting the garden areas prepped in the way that I wanted to. Right. So I'm going to take it as a win, although it took much longer and it actually delayed a lot of my plantings. But I feel really good about kind of the setup that I have for kind of going into next year. Now, I did pull out some landscape timbers and I put them alongside my garage thinking like, I wonder if I could build a small bed there. Because I can't help myself. But based on kind of the Chicago winters and how the concrete is cracked and it's not even. I think I'm going to talk myself out of it. But the work I did to prep the garden in the spring, I feel like will pay off for years to come. And so this is also probably marking what's probably near, if not the last kind of garden expansion for me. So that's pretty significant. I'm not saying that I'll never expand my garden, but I think I'll be settled in kind of the growing spaces I created, for the next few years easily.
Excuse me. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm. So that puts me at somewhere around like April, May-ish.
Oh, you're going to time jump. I got you. You're just going to time jump just like that.
I'm just telling you, like, I didn't have a win until April or May. What do you want me to do here?
Well, I mean, and truth be told, I mean, your garden is not doing much in those in between months other than starting seeds and stuff. So, yeah, if I'm thinking, other than my potatoes for like early spring, there wasn't much going on in my garden. I was able to get my raised beds built inside the wild garden this year, so I was pretty happy about that part of it, and we're gonna leave that one there for now. But it was, I was happy to be able to do that because it's like you said, it kind of sets you up for the future. And it took me longer and cost me more than I wanted, which is not a win for sure. But if I go into April and stuff like that, I mean, man, I had explosive growth early in the spring. I've never had growth like that before. My turnips and stuff, I think I did like a fourth sowing of turnips come about March or April. Yes, ma'am. Was that
spring sowed, or was that stuff that you had sowed last winter?
Of the explosive growth stuff? Spring sowed. So I was running really low on stuff in the garden come, I'd say early March, and then I was replenishing at that point. So as I did that, I was able to get a number of things going in the garden. I did a lot of reconstruction last fall or last winter, so that was kind of a point of contention within my garden because there's a lot of new spaces that were just kind of amended and built and stuff like that. But when I was able to do my last and final sowing of like radishes and turnips and lettuces, I was able to get really good growth off that. And the greenhouse did really well last year. Spoiler alert, it looks like the greenhouse is probably going to do pretty good this year, but it's still way too early to tell. But I had a lot of chard in the greenhouse all winter. I actually had so much that I could not eat it all. It just grew. So, which isn't a bad thing because it keeps the soil active instead of just sitting there dead collecting weeds, which we did have a weed outbreak in there. But that was a big win for me because this is now going to be my third winter with the greenhouse. Damn, I'm getting old. And making adjustments each year is really big. And since I'm talking about the greenhouse, I'm going to fast forward all the way to right now, today. And this is the first time that I've got a patch of carrots successfully germinated inside the greenhouse. So I'm really excited about that. That was one thing that I really wanted to grow in the greenhouse when I got it. And last year I couldn't get them to germinate. The year before I couldn't. And then this year I re-sowed again and we now have like full germination. So I've got probably a square foot and a half of carrots in there, and everything in the greenhouse is really small scale. So it's it's not like it's this massive food production, but if I can get them to get their first true leaves, which should happen soon before it starts getting cold, then I should be good and I'll be able to get a harvest earlier from the greenhouse while the rest of the carrots start to catch up in the spring. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about it, actually.
Okay.
Go.
I think for carrots is actually probably just connecting with you there. Carrots have been mixed for me, but generally speaking, a huge win. Like I have gone from, this is probably the 6th year I've tried to grow carrots. And the last 3 years, so half of those years, like it took me the last 3 years, up until the last 3 years to actually produce a carrot. And I quite literally went from like 3 years ago, I had 1 carrot to harvest. And I was just like Tom Hanks, like, I created a carrot.
Yeah.
Right? Super duper excited about it. And then last year was more of a success story. And then this year, and this is a huge piece for me across the board. I feel like I'm finally getting my hands around not all, but some of the timing for planting and the quantities, right? So summer plants, that's what I've grown for almost all of the years I've gardened, right? So generally speaking, planting time, solid. Quantity, per plant, I'm still working out that formula. But something like carrots, I know hands down, I need to get those in April, period, point blank. And this is for me in my area. Anything I try to sow beyond April, it's questionable.
Right.
So I've sowed in early April. I've sown in late April. Both of those time periods produce. So I actually have a window to stagger them even, which I think is pretty freaking cool. And because of the combination of maybe not being able to grow them and the quest to grow them and then finally growing them, somehow it's become one of my favorite vegetables. I mean, who knew?
Carrots are cool to grow, man. The first year I grew them, this is my 3rd year growing them as well. The first year I grew them, I sowed them in spring, and I got a harvest out in like July, which, is not perfect. You want to kind of get them out when it's a little bit cooler. And I was excited about that. And I was talking to somebody, oh man, I can't remember the name of them. It's a seed supplier in North Carolina. I can't remember who it was, but they were telling me, October is a really good time to sow carrots in this state because you can get them started and then you can get that early harvest that you're looking for. So that's where I'm going now. So this spring, I actually did not sow any carrots this spring, and I just decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it in the fall, and then I'll get them in the spring. And then I can even come back in the spring this year, and I'll probably do like a smaller patch just to try and like figure out a little bit more. But there's something to be said about like getting it down and figuring it out. So like right now I have 4 carrot patches in my garden, and I'm going to continue sowing more because the theory is, and I really hope this works out. Gosh, I hope this works out. I'll be able to harvest them before something else needs to go in their place. You know what I mean? I hope it works out like I'm planning.
Right. Forgive
so
me.
it's good to have that.
I was distracted. I had a call from a good girlfriend, and her grandmother has been ill. And so I, texted her, I'm on a call. Is everything okay? And she literally said, I've been talking so much about your salsa that grandma wanted to try it. Do you have any more? And so she's like, we'll pay you for it. And I'm like, come on. Like, really? Your money is not any good. I'll be over there this week. I'll bring a jar. She's like, 2 jars? I'm like, all right, now come on now.
Yeah.
So I did. It's the recipe that you gave me. So cracking the code. That's not this year's win. Cracking the code of salsa. This isn't a win, but I want to take, a small break. Insert the word if you know it. Early and often, I'm going to keep saying it until I actually start doing it. Harvesting early and often.
Yeah.
So you talk about kind of the way that you have those carrots in those different plots. And I'm talking about, like, I think I got easily a solid month where I could, stagger the plantings, the sowings. Now, the only asterisk around that whole staggering, especially earlier in the season, is I don't know, like, we'll see next year if it ends up catching up with, itself. So it's something I sow on April 1. Does it catch up with what I sow on April 20th? I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. But the intention when I go into kind of, maybe I'll take a win as like relearning this lesson of harvest these things early and often. We've been talking about it all this year. We've been talking about it for years. And I felt like this year, and maybe this does have a better place in the losses, I felt like this year I felt kind of the brunt of my lackadaisical harvesting, and things that really were. So I had enough in my garden to be harvesting and enjoying. And the, kind of womp womp moment is that I still miss some opportunities. But it's such a blessing to know that, these things were producing, So that's what I got.
Yeah. I've done that with peas before. So technically I can sow peas in January. And typically I sow them in March. And the ones I sow in January end up the same sizes as the one I sow in March every year. So there's not really that big a difference. The only difference is I'm starting seeds earlier in the year, like planting in the garden. So I don't know. It works out, but at the same time, like it's hit or miss. Like, I mean, if I feel like going out there in January, then I will. But otherwise, for me, it's just like you might as well just wait and give it time, and let everything catch up.
There's also the balance. Even if it catches up, there's also the balance, and these things are nuanced. I'm only going to check one row, let's say, as an example, of carrots if I sowed them in, on April 1. Versus if I sowed all of my carrots, now I'm like, the workload is a little bit larger. And just obviously know that I'm not just sowing carrots on April 1. There's other activity in the garden. And so again, we're in October now. So whether or not I still have that strong opinion next year, I don't know. But it feels good to say, I firmly believe sowing carrots in May for me is hit or miss. Right. They definitely may, I'm sorry, I can't help myself, produce. But my best success has been with April sowings. And I feel like being able to tune that in. And to be quite frank, do it now. So apply that and move on to the next vegetable. That's huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an announcement to make. I got Brussels sprouts last year. 3 years in. Now, let's not go crazy. They were the size of maybe 2 pencil erasers when I got them. But I got Brussels sprouts, so there it is. I said it. I've said it out loud. I've put it into the universe. I have threatened for years that I'm not going to do Brussels sprouts if I didn't get a harvest. And I got it. So we're going to keep moving forward with them, damn it. I have set myself up for failure this year. It was out of my control, but we're going to do it again, and we're going to see what happens. I've planted them in an area that gets a lot of sun, so we'll see what happens. But I hear through the grapevine that you're actually growing Brussels sprouts, and I want to know more about it.
Well, I'll send you the website where I'll be selling all of my Brussels sprout harvest because it's just that much. No, I joke. So I learned what Brussels sprouts look like as they grow. So that's making lemonade out of lemons. I accidentally purchased Brussels sprout starts. I thought they were collards. And it took me a while to figure it out. Right. So now I know I'll never make that mistake again when it comes to what those leaves look like. But I was also successful in starting Brussels sprouts from seed indoors and transplanting them out. And they transplanted out that's how big they were. And it's showing now. But I think every year I can add a brassica to my list of starting from seed is a win. I learned a lot about Brussels sprouts in this first year, which you're not always able to say for something you're trying to grow for the first time. So I'll continue to grow them, but I already have notes on how I'll make adjustments, So just quickly, one of the things I'll do is prepare for staking, so all of my plants didn't get to 4 feet tall, but some of them did, so I'll make steps similar to how you make steps to cage something like a tomato, like to stake it from the beginning. I'll do that, and that'll save me some trouble. But more importantly, I was really waiting and seeing. because I was so unfamiliar with growing Brussels sprouts. And if a little bit of intervention probably would have gotten me more Brussels sprouts. So aphids, and I know how you feel about them, and I say this every time I bring up aphids, but aphids on Brussels sprouts are different than aphids on other leafy greens. And primarily it's the circumference of the leaf, right? You know, so a big collard leaf, you got a lot of space if aphids cluster. Spray them, they're gone, right? For Brussels sprouts, it's less about them being on the leaves of the Brussels sprouts and more about them being on the actual sprout itself. And so you've seen them in the grocery stores. Every recipe says cut the Brussels sprouts off, pull off the first couple of leaves that are bruised or yellowed or whatever. Now think about that in my garden, and I have a number of leaves that basically have aphid residue, that have yellow, that have browned. So I should have treated that earlier. And then finally for Brussels sprouts, I planted mine in May, and they're still in the garden now.
Yeah.
It's a long time. That's like 150, 160 days. And while half of them were really small, the other half were really healthy transplants. And so I would have topped them off much earlier. And we've briefly talked about topping off like pepper plants way back when. But I would have not let them get so big and then put more energy into producing and maturing the sprouts. So, and that's not to say every plant, but the plants, once they were getting large, I knew of the concept. I just didn't take the action. So, but huge win. I still don't know what the end harvest is going to be, but I feel great about, generally speaking, this year.
Years ago, I went to, I used to do all of my grocery shopping at like BJ's. Do you know what BJ's is?
No.
It's like a
There's
Costco
a BJ's
or
I
a
have,
Sam's.
and it's like a restaurant, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Costco or a Sam's. And they sold Brussels sprouts that were still in the stock. So this was years ago before I even thought about growing Brussels sprouts. So I was like, dang, it helped me out. So I know when I grow them, like how they're going to look on the stock. You know what I mean? Because that's how you bought them there. And they were discounted because nobody wanted to pick them off. So we had a lot of Brussels sprouts that year. But I think, I don't know if I should say this out loud or not, but I'm going to. I got some seeds a couple years ago from Baker's Creek. And every year they grow the exact same. They stay small. They don't do much. And this year I went, because I was sick and I didn't have my seeds do well, I couldn't take care of them. I went and bought some starts, and they're totally different kind of plant. It looks completely different than the ones that I've been starting. So I think that part of my issue historically has been the variety that I'm growing, I think. I'm not going to sit here and say on this podcast that Baker's Creek sells bad seeds, but I'm going to say that I wasn't impressed in the way they grew, and they just didn't look like a normal plant would look, like you would think. So when I got these other ones, and I've been keeping my eye on it, and I was actually, before we recorded this, I was doing my first greenhouse tour video for the fall. And I had mentioned that, like, I showed the difference in the two, and I'm going to be curious to see how they do against each other. So, I know that I got them in the ground later, like much later, but at the same time, they can take a chill, and in the greenhouse typically is a better place for them because I don't get frost in there really at all. That I don't think I do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't. It gets below freezing, but nothing ever has frost on it. Don't know why that is. There's probably a science to it that I'm not aware of, which is okay. But I'm curious to see moving forward, like, what the two are going to do, because I'm definitely going to get a different variety next year. I'm not ready to throw the towel in. And that's especially because I had to get them in so late. Ideally, I would have gotten them in the ground 2 months before I did this year. So we'll see moving forward. I need to do some more research, but that's what I like about all of this is, you figure out a plant and you just start trying to hone in on it each year, and I mean, there's not, but so many, how much cabbage and carrots and stuff can you grow when you have a larger space, so you have room to play around with different kinds of crops.
Yeah, I think this isn't a win, but I want to comment on it. I mean, I think
Okay.
well, I'm gonna put it as a win, but not like in my top 10 win category. Being reminded that variety matters, like the variety of a thing you grow matters, I think is super important. I have had mixed results when it comes to starting spinach. I mean, years of growing spinach, mixed results of like successfully growing it. And I have a bunch of different varieties. And this past fall, I started to realize, all right, the description of this variety is great, but it ain't working for you, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you look at Brussels sprouts, there are two things, and this is a real, like, this is a quiet part out loud. There's something to be said about what I got as a transplant from the store for Brussels sprouts as an example, and then what I got from starting from seed. Right. I don't know the variety I picked up from the store. They, you know, at this point now they're barely labeling that stuff. It wasn't even labeled Brussels sprout. That's how I accidentally bought it. But there's something to be said about which was the stronger plant. Right.
Yeah.
And I do think that, you know, generally speaking, there are only a couple of things that I grew historically from transplants purchased compared to me starting my seeds. A lot of them, it doesn't make a difference. I have just as good as a pepper a year if I'm growing them from my own seeds versus, you know, something I purchased. But there's some things that I've noticed a difference in the production.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so, you know, I keep that in mind when it comes to, you know, if I'm going to put aside, what if I put aside $50? I'm going to get like 2 transplants now, you know, for $50.
Yeah.
But I think it's worthwhile for me to say, especially with my history of, you know, struggling with starting some of these things, it's okay to set aside some budget money for these vegetables you really want to grow and purchasing them as transplants. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I think, you know, on the discussion of varieties, you know, I went back to growing Roma tomatoes and had a great spring, early summer with my Roma tomatoes. And I was able to get a second sowing in. I had some leftover starts. I put them in a little late. I've never done this. And I can remember clearly one August calling Batavia and saying, you know, my tomatoes have a bad disease. They're just ravished at this point. And I was going to the store to do something. I was like, they still got tomato starts out, you know? And I remember having the conversation with you about like, you think I should get them and put them in, or do you think it's a waste? And we kind of both were like, I mean, they're selling them for a reason, but you know how that could be. So this year, because I had some extra ones laying around and they were in pretty bad shape, I wasn't watering because, you know, I kind of just didn't care about the seedlings at this point. It was months later. I ended up just putting them in the ground, and they are full grown plants right now. They're full of green tomatoes. I'm more than likely, I think at this point, not going to get a red tomato off of them. But it allowed me to see like, hey, if you plant this like a month earlier, especially with like Romas, because we know they're determinate. And they kind of come and go. So once they start to slow down, if I put more Roma tomatoes in, then I should be able to continue my harvest throughout the summer. Because last year was the year that I deviated from that and I grew orange banana tomatoes and I hated them. I hated not having a red tomato. I didn't grow a single red tomato last year, so that wasn't good. But in 2022, I had a really good year. We canned a bunch of cans of tomatoes and stuff like that. And even now, like, it's not the greatest, and we're just about tonight. It's supposed to get to 39 degrees. So, and we're gonna have 2 nights of that. Now, it could get below that. It could get above that. I don't know. We have a frost watch in effect. So if they make it through, I still have a little bit more time, but the sunlight's hurting at this point. The sun's really low. So I don't know what the chances are. I'm hoping that I might be able to get like a light flush of red tomatoes, but I'm not going to hold my breath completely. But moving forward, I call it a win because I know that if I put my tomatoes in April 15th-ish, I usually do it April 21st to be exact, and then I come back like June 21st and I put them in, then I'll be able to continuously get tomatoes until the end of the year. Mm-hmm. You know,
that's
so
huge.
Yeah. And so this year, you know, I always talk about on here and everywhere else that, you know, go ahead and pull up your tomatoes. They're not going to make anything else. But this year I really want to leave them in because I want to see how they do based on the second planting that I did. You know, I mean, as of right now, they look fine. They're lush, they're green. And you compare them to my other Roma tomatoes that are sitting around, dude, they look kind of rough. You know what I mean?
I was talking about this on a recent video because we are at the point where we've gotten down to like 34, 35 degrees Fahrenheit, like overnight going into the early morning hours. And so I went ahead and pulled everything that was summer-like off of the plant. So all of my peppers, I still had a couple of eggplants. So I pull all that stuff off. So there's no mad dash. Like, is it going to be a frost? Is this thing going to survive? So I feel good about that. But one of the comments I made was peppers are actually, they've become the hardest thing for me to part with. Not just because I had a kick-ass pepper year, because I did. No, not because of that, but because year over year, they're always the healthiest plant at the end of the season. And end of the season, I mean, like going into the frost. They
Isn't it
almost
frustrating?
they almost always have flowers on them. I think I said something like, you know, if I had another month, like these things would just totally kick butt. I'm like, but that's not my truth. So I'm going to get past that. But compared to tomatoes, where anytime I've had tomatoes in my garden in October, boy, they have looked like they're on life support. The fruit themselves most times look fine, but the plant is like, I have given all I could give. You know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that you have still healthy tomato plants. And there's something there. We'll talk about that offline when it comes to, you know, it's the same garden, likely treated the same way, and the why. You probably already know, and I have some ideas as to the why as well. But that's super cool. That's an absolute win.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, my pepper plants are hurting right now, but they've got a handful of pepper. I mean, it's like you said, every year before the frost, they really start producing more and more. I don't know if it's like the cool weather coming stresses them to try and produce more, maybe. But I'm like you, they are the hardest to get rid of because they just, you keep seeing peppers come up on them. And I'm like, well, why should I? And it's like, I'm staring down the barrel of this cold. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm still, I mean, I have a handful of peppers out there. I don't want to take them down. And my peppers are looking a little rough too. I have to amend my soil this year, which we'll talk about in another podcast. So
the only ones that are struggling for me are the ones that were in some containers that I neglected here and there through the summer. I have a special announcement, and I'm just going to pull the Band-Aid off. I put on socks today.
Already?
Dude, listen, I had a moment where I had a conversation with myself, said, like, who are you doing this for? You're too old to be playing this game. I
was going to say, the older you get, the weaker you get.
Like, yeah, exactly. It's like, my mom hasn't even asked me yet. That's how early this is, right? And I'm just like, it started with footies. I felt that was a cheat. I know you're like, what are footies? I know you asked me that when I mentioned it before. But I started, you know, with kind of the woolish type socks, you know, you walk around instead of house shoes. And then today I was just like, I'm not going to go outside with Crocs with no socks on. I'm not going to freeze for my garden walk. I'm putting on socks and that's it. You know, so, but I say that to say, we have about 4 or 5 days in a row that our lows are going to be 34 degrees. And I've been keeping an eye on things, but this is the heartbreak weather, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get like a week of, you know, mid 40s as a low, which is like great for fall season, you know, crops. And it's just going to be week to week until we get to the point of, you know, my first frost, and then it still will be week to week. And that's fine. Yeah, but, I accept it. I don't like it, not one bit, but you know.
Well, let's fast forward to fall then, real quick. What's going good right now?
I'm thinking.
The silence is deafening everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you need to fast forward to the Lost episode. No. So, fall has been a struggle like no other. A listener, and I'm shouting out the listener who commented around, you know, continued sowing and it was a reminder of what I said I was going to do and what I didn't do. So I didn't sow like every month this year, and it's still a goal of mine, but I really picked things up in July, kind of after the, tomato gate, and I was sowing everything and so little produced. Direct sowings, starting seeds indoors, starting seeds outdoors. But if there's a win, it wasn't like kind of zero production. I do have fall plantings that are in my garden. And so like I'm pleased with that. I struggle with calling it a win because I just don't think I'm going to have enough time in my season for those things to mature, which is kind of sad.
I'm trying to think for me. I've got my turnips are going, all the carrots and stuff are good. Everything is looking good now, but a lot of things are smaller than I would like for them to be because of my holdup I had. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, unless we have a crazy winter, I think I should be okay. It's nothing that a few low tunnels couldn't fix if I had to. Mm-hmm. So there is that aspect. We're getting this little cold tonight, so the fall vegetables will love it. I don't know. I'm really hoping that it doesn't get too cold and doesn't affect the tomatoes too much because we're going to get back up in the 70s and 50s at night. Mm-hmm, so if that happens, then, if everything makes it through this, then I should be able to sail through the next couple weeks at least and continue getting some growth. But, for the most part, most things are doing well. The wild garden, I did a video a while back about the bad soil that I have, and I've halfway amended it, I'd say, maybe quarter, trying to correct the issue, and things are going okay. One bed's actually doing pretty good. Another bed's doing all right. And then the sweet potato bed that I had seems to be on the up and up for now. But I want to remind everybody, like I said in the video that I did, I'm planting everything in that bed in order to help work the soil. Mm-hmm. So I'm not completely sold on the fact of like, hey, I'm going to get a lot of carrots out of it because I had compaction issues. So the win for that would be if I get carrots to drill down into that compacted soil some. That's all I care about. Yeah. It's not necessarily about harvesting a full-blown carrot from there. It's more about making it so the soil's better and ready to accept nutrition for next year. So, I have low hopes for it, but that's going to set me up for a win. And if I get a carrot to eat, then I'm happy. And, it's not like it won't be good to eat, but moving forward, it just will kind of be what it is. So, on that note, it has come to the time where we stop talking about food and let you know that we have a recipe of the day. All right, everybody. So I was unprepared and Batavia tried to steal it from me, but I think I found a pretty good one. I'm going to give you a recipe that we have had once, and it was very good. And it is an almond pear tart. So pears are great for fall. They usually come into season about this time, and they are delicious. So I'm going to give you the easy way, because I'm not a baker, so I'm not going to tell you how to make the dough, but if you know how to make it, go for it. You're going to need a pastry for single crust pie, so you can get like a tube of it or what have you. 3/4 cup and an extra 2 teaspoons of sugar, so you want those divided. 3 tablespoons of flour, 4 cups of sliced peeled fresh pears, and that usually equals to be about 4 medium pears. And 3 tablespoons of sliced almonds. You're going to flour your surface, roll your dough into a 10-inch circle, and then you're going to put it on parchment paper lined baking sheet, and then combine in a bowl the sugar, flour, and pears, and you're going to toss it all to coat, and then you're going to spoon it over the crust and leave 2 inches on the edge. And then you're going to fold it over and sprinkle the rest of the sugar on top, And at this point, when you fold it over, if you take your fork and you kind of push on it, you'll get that nice seal on the edge. You're going to bake it at 450 for 15 minutes until the crust is golden and filling is bubbly. Sprinkle with almonds and then bake it for 5 minutes longer. And the trick here, when we had it, was the almonds were brown just a little bit on top and it released more of the flavor. And then you got to let it cool though. Okay? Don't do what I did and just bite into it. It's terrible. I have burn marks going down my face. So make sure that you let it cool and enjoy it. This is a great one for Thanksgiving dinner too. So,
Okay.
And if you don't have a pear tree, you can go to an orchard and pick your pear trees. And if you look at pickyourown.org, they will have a list of farms in which you can do so. I don't have a pear tree because I pulled mine out. You know what? I forgot to talk about my biggest win of all. And I'm not closing out the episode until I tell y'all that I got peaches last year. Booyah.
Y'all your peaches.
I got some yellow peaches. I planted them in the fall. And in July, I got about 50 or 60 peaches off of it. And it was about to break in half. So I got peaches. And I put another peach tree in this year. And I put a plum tree in too. And I pulled up a pear tree because it was pissing me off. I have one more pear tree that's on its last leg. It's got one more year and then it's done.
So this is a cheat because I'm going to ask you to respond in the same way. So the peaches were the most exciting moment for me for your garden,
Yeah.
right?
By far the most
Yeah.
exciting. I could not believe that I got peach. I didn't expect to. It was the first year I planted it.
Now, in return, you have to express the best moment from my garden that you observed.
We can't do that until the next episode. I'm joking. No, when you pulled up that carrot, that was a moment. That was a moment.
Yeah,
Because
sitting on concrete.
seriously, when you grow carrots, they don't come out picture perfect a lot of times. And the one that I saw was picture perfect.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
got
it
some
looked
ugly
like-
ones
but-
too. Mostly
Hold on.
though. Hold on. Mostly ugly because they cracked, which ties into picking early and harvesting early and often.
So you just pulled my mom. My mom does this where she overtalks you, but when you try and keep going, she talks louder.
I saw you just look down like you were just looking at your shoes. Like,
I was
I'm
gonna
sorry,
say
buddy.
that carrot was like, I mean, it looked like Bugs Bunny was gonna come around the corner and grab it. You know how cartoon food just looks so damn good.
Yeah.
It had that look. So that was the moment. I was proud of you.
Thank you. It
You're
was
welcome.
a proud moment.
You're welcome. So everybody, I hope you had great wins in your garden this year, and I hope you remember those, because on the next episode we will be talking about failures, and I'm going to go ahead and forewarn you. There is going to be a lot to learn from it, because we have diagnosed and re-diagnosed and re-diagnosed these problems over and over so we can try and fix them. So hopefully you'll learn a lot from that one, but hopefully you enjoyed this one. And don't forget, you can support us on Patreon, Teespring, all that good stuff, Amazon, and YouTube. So check us out. And until next time.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
Go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
all purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck!
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.